wanted to start a Q&A because a lot of people are jumping into SOMOS for the first time this semester, either because they just found out about it last semester or they tried a few things and are ready to go all in now. So I wanted to help you get your questions answered. And even if SOMOS is not something that you're considering or something on the horizon for you, but if you're a language teacher with questions about comprehension-based language teaching, then drop them. So you can start asking questions whenever you want, and I will get to them as we have time. The first question that I wanted to answer was, if you are new to SOMOS and you've decided to jump in this semester, where do you start? And my recommendation is, if you're working with a level 1 class, just start at the beginning. Even though that you've had a whole semester of language teaching, I should put a little caveat on it. If you've been working with other comprehension-based methods, you might adapt this. But if this is the first time that you're jumping into, you're pulling away from your textbook, you're moving away from a grammar and vocabulary explicit instruction approach, then I would definitely start just right at the beginning with level 1. Even though your kids have already have a semester of language behind them. And that's because this is just a totally different way of teaching. And so even though they may have spent a semester in level 1 working with topical vocabulary and some grammar concepts, they're not going to have the contextualized language and the communicative ability that's going to be that they're going to be immersed in as they jump into SOMOS. And I would say that, I mean, that's true of any comprehension-based method you're going to use. Don't ever worry about it being too basic for your kids. Just jump in, and you can always level up the language you're using as you converse with your kiddos. If you have classes that are not level 1, if you have levels 2 through 2, 3, I wouldn't say SOMOS is a great fit for beyond that. But if it's level 2 or 3 and this is the first time that they're going to be doing a comprehension-based curriculum and you're looking to get into SOMOS, I would recommend starting with Unit 1 of level 2. It's a very conversational unit, so it's fairly loose. There's a lot of card talk in that unit. Card talk is when you basically have your students draw a picture on a card. Look, I've got a computer test paper. So I don't know, if I was smart, I would have had a little pen here. Oh, actually, I had this whole thing. What did I do with that? I had a whiteboard, and I had my whiteboard markers because I thought I might have to do a little demonstration, but I didn't bring it over here, so alas. But you know, you might say, oh, where did you go over break, or who did you see over break? And then they might draw a picture of their grandma. See, she has curly hair. I'll give her glasses too. And so then you just go around, and all card talk is talking about information that they've put on a piece of paper. And I guess as it was originally started, you could look up Circling with Balls from Ben Slavic, and he talks about it in several of his instructional manuals, PQA in a Wink, the big CI book. But it's just, once kids have these cards, these papers with pictures on them, you just walk around the room and you say, oh, class, I should do this in English because you guys might not all be Spanish teachers. Who did Riley see over break? Who is this? Who did she see? Oh, she saw her grandpa. Maybe. Do you think, is this Riley's grandma? Grandpa? No. Is it her sister? No, her sister doesn't wear glasses. Oh, it's her grandma. She went to her grandma's house. Oh, what did you do? Did anyone else go to their grandma's house? So it's just using that as a prop for conversation. And for me, it helps so much. Anytime you're doing like a freewheeling discussion with your students, it helps me to have my students have a prop. So either a picture that they've drawn or something that they've written down, just something physical that I can talk about. I found that to be really helpful for myself. So yeah, so that's what I would say. So if you're curious about where to start with SOMOS level 1, even if they've had a semester, start with Unit 1 of level 1. Any levels beyond that, start with Unit 2. And then there's also a fable in there. And after that, you can kind of adjust, and you can see if, this is if this is your student's first exposure to comprehension-based teaching, if this is just going to be too much for them and they don't have those really high frequency vocabulary words already acquired at their disposal, if they're not understanding them when you're using them, then you can jump back to other units, or you can look for additional resources for how to support them in that. And it's not, I would say that if you get to level 2 and you start teaching like this and you're like, my kids don't understand anything, it's not their fault, it's not the method's fault, it's not your fault, it's just the whatever curriculum that you've been working with didn't present them with it. And so it's an easy fix. You can just go back and just focus on finding ways to provide them with contextualized language to fill in those holes. Okay, Angela asked, this is my first novel, any tips? So she said she's planning to start Capybara. And I would say if it is your first novel, I would get the teacher's manual, first of all, so that you have all of the resources that are already created. And then also look for lesson plans that other teachers have posted online. So typically with novels, teachers aren't posting their activities like worksheets and things, because the novels are copyrighted. So unless they have the permission of the publisher, they probably can't do that. But a lot of teachers will say, you know, on day 1 of teaching this novel, or, you know, before we jumped into it, I did this kind of hook, and then on day 2 we did this activity from the teacher's manual, and then this and that and the other thing. And so those are really helpful to look through. I know Alison Weinhold has like 1 million novels that she has written about on her blog, Mis Clases Locas. So I think that she has written about Capybara con Botas. I've done Esperanza and El Nuevo Houdini on my blog, and you can kind of see the flow that I go through with that. And then other than that, Capybara isn't a Fluency Matters novel, but there's a group for using Fluency Matters novels, and you might be able to go in and just search the archives in there for some general tips on teaching with novels and see what you can find. And then also, I mean, Myra Canyon is just so willing to help. And if you reach out to her at any point while you're using one of her novels, I know she would love to support you and give you advice and help you get through. And she's also been known to Skype with students and connect with her readers in other ways. So definitely connect with her. Megan, so I am not planning on doing anything beyond level 2 as far as creating things for SOMOS, although I am, since I'm now working with some adult learners who are pretty advanced, I'm going to be sharing some of the materials I'm going to be using with them, but it'll be not something really for a full-on high school unit. Kara Jacobs, Christy Placido, Carrie Toth, Nellie Hughes, Arian Dowd, they have fantastic materials for upper level students. They have blogs, Facebook pages, TPT stores, so definitely check them out. And then, yeah, I mean, novels, if I taught those levels full time, I would be using a novel-based curriculum. But like you said, SOMOS really brings all of the elements together, and I think that if you look at those teachers' units, you will find similar materials that you can use to prepare students for novels or in between novels that are really going to give you like the same range of activities and the depth of content that you find in SOMOS. So great question, and someday, but I don't really have any plans for it. One teacher asked, I'm new to SOMOS. Is it okay if she only has SOMOS 1. Ileana asked this. I only have SOMOS 1. Can I use it with my level 1s and level 2s? And I say yes. Like I started out saying, it is a completely different learning experience for your students when you're using a comprehension-based approach versus a traditional grammar and vocabulary syllabus. And even if you are a teacher who teaches 90% or 100% in the target language in class, and students are really used to hearing you go through that, the kinds of engagement that you are going to be, engagement meaning like interaction, the ways that you're engaging with your students, interacting with them, are so different in a comprehension-based class. And that is what I experienced. The level of personalization with everything that we did in class was so completely different that it didn't matter that my students had been in class for a semester or a year and a half. It was as if we were starting all over. And so when I switched, I had students who had been in Spanish for a semester, and then I had students who had been in class they would have been in for a year and a half because they had another teacher for a year before me. And I started them all out in the same place. I hadn't started developing SOMOS yet, but we did all the same stories. I worked from Ann Matava's scripts in her, in her story scripts, volume 1, it would have been at the time. And actually, I think it was even before it was a volume. I was just getting them from Ben Slavik's blog, but we just did all the same stories, and all the classes did great with them. Hola, Alicia. For those of you guys in the SOMOS curriculum collaboration group, great news, Alicia finished today moving the collaboration drive to the new one, so it's going to be way less complicated, and she did it all coming off of knee surgery. So she is a superhero in my eyes, and I'm so thankful for her, and glad that she can join tonight. Okay, so Lauren says, most of my classes are between 20 and 33 students, which is my sweet spot. I actually prefer more students, although over 30 is a challenge. You get a lot of interaction, but it sure is crazy. And then one first-year French with only 6 students. And I think that a lot of you can relate. I've seen this often, that sometimes those small classes are really hard. And I think that if you have small classes exclusively, maybe it wouldn't be so difficult, but it's just such a different teaching experience than when you have a lot of students. So tips for tiny classes, I would say my plans, my smallest class, there was one year where I had, well, I guess it doesn't even matter. I had one class with 23 one year, so it doesn't matter. I'll tell you what I'm doing with my class of 2 students. So I have 2 students. I have Spanish students again. I have 2 grown-ups that I'm teaching Spanish to a couple times a week. And I would say plan much more loosely. So come prepared with content to talk about. I did, when I was teaching at the university level, I had a conversation class that met once a week with 9 students in it, I think. And so we would just come with a topic each week to talk about. And if all you have is the topic and probably fewer activities, just work more with discussion in those classes, which can kind of be hard on you. But I just imagine that, you're in a smaller circle, you can really connect with each other. And then you really have an opportunity in those small classes to dig into their individual interests. Sometimes it's harder in big classes because there are just so many different students, different personalities, different interests. So to focus on each student, for a day or whatever, it can be hard. But if you say, okay, well, this kid likes basketball and we're a small class, so we're going to talk about basketball and we're going to learn everything that we can about basketball for a week. I think that in a smaller class, students will tolerate that a lot more than in a big class. Hello. So on one novel, Dylan asked, how long do you typically spend? I think it is, one time I spent a quarter on a novel, and that was way too long. We totally lost momentum. We had a lot of really interesting activities that we were doing and content that we were digging into, but I would not recommend that. So I would say if your novel is 10 chapters, 2 days, I would block it out for like 2 or 3 days per chapter, knowing that you might not actually spend all of those days working on a single chapter, but then you have some flex time built in for before you start the novel and after you finish the novel. When I teach a novel, I recommend spending a lot of your time teaching it before you actually even open up the book. So make sure that your students are going to be able to read it with ease. Make sure that you, as you read through, well, first of all, preview the novel that you're going to read with your students. Make sure you've read it first. And then identify all the words in there that your students are already really comfortable with. And then identify all the words in the book that they are not already familiar with and that they will need to know in order to to understand the novel with ease. And then pre-teach that vocabulary before you jump into the novel. And when I say pre-teach vocabulary, I don't mean to do it with traditional drill activities with vocabulary, but look for opportunities to bring it up in topical discussion before the novel. So, for example, Christy Placida's new novel, Mata la Piñata, which is really fun. She wrote it with her son, who's a teenage boy. So I think that it's a great new addition. Before you even start the novel, spend some time talking about piñatas, talk about celebrations, and all of the vocabulary that is wrapped up in that is going to naturally be recycled as you jump into the novel. So Polyphenes, you also said, yeah, the small class. Oh, you have a class of 1. Yes, that's very hard. So like I said, I would say for those classes, plan very loosely, ask a lot of personalized questions, and really in those small classes, let your students really be the teacher. So if they are passionate about, I don't know, anything. So I think earlier I said basketball, or I'm thinking about my kids. He's like super into shiny knights. What's the real word for those? Not shiny knights. He calls them shiny knights, like knights in shining armor. Okay, so like knights in castles and stuff. He loves those right now. So okay, so we're gonna go and learn about shiny knights, and we're gonna do it in Spanish. So if you just have one student, let them teach you everything they know about the content area, and you can do that by using all of your conversational skills. They can share a fact, and then you can restate it to them in the target language. You can ask those circling questions, which are really just clarifying questions to clarify the information and cement the meaning of that in a student's mind, and just really let them take the lead. And you can do that in big classes too. But I think that in big classes, you can get away with a lot more. In small classes, really letting them drive it is going to help you. So Kara says that they're doing a unit on myths and legends, using lots of short ones. Really fun, creative ideas. So I don't know if you're looking for ideas on specific legends or myths, but if anybody has some suggestions for Kara, drop them in the comments. There are a ton of resources out there for myths and legends. I have a bunch in the SOMOS curriculum. Unit 8 works with a couple. I just blogged about the legend of the Muki from Peru that I used with my adult learners, which is really fun. And then let's see, I have the Lago Encantado. I'm guessing you're Spanish because you said León en el Crío. So with myths and legends, there are usually a lot of resources that you can find online, a lot of authentic resources like videos, often even songs that have been inspired by the legends. You think about Llorona, the legend of the Llorona. There's quite a bit of music that has been written inspired by that, short films, poetry. So you can really make rich, interesting units based around that. And then and acting it out is really fun with myths and legends. So doing a reader's theater kind of a deal. Using CI with AP. So Marielle asked, how can I use CI with AP? And I love that question. I can't answer it based on my own personal experience because I never taught at that level. However, there are a lot of teachers that have and have really shared how they work with their AP classes, but then also how they have designed their whole programs with CI to prepare their student, to better prepare their students for AP using comprehension-based approaches. So Darcy Pippins always comes to mind, but there's a lot of other people that have shared it as well. And I think that the big thing that I would want to say about that question is, it seems to me as I'm traveling around and working with teachers, there's this idea that CI is really for low-level classes. And then when you get into the upper levels, everyone kind of starts freaking out, like, I don't know what to do now, because I don't know how to keep language really simple. And remember that comprehensible input doesn't mean it's really simple language. It means that you are using language that is an appropriate next step for your students. So you're gently pushing them on to the next level of acquisition, and you're using language in context. So the way that you use CI in your AP classes is the same way that you use CI in your low-level classes. Obviously, you're going to have students that are at a higher level of maturity than in your middle school courses. And so, you need to adapt the kinds of activities, the kinds of topics that you're talking about with them. But you're still focused on providing them with reading material that they can understand and listening input that they can understand. And what they can understand in an AP class is much more advanced, much more complex, typically, than what a student in Spanish 1 can understand. So keep looking for ways for students to read content to help make those AP texts comprehensible to your students. So look, use embedded readings. Look for embedded readings that have already been created for the texts that are going to be on the AP exam. And then look for opportunities to just notice grammar with students, do pop-up grammar. And then beyond that, I would say definitely search in the many different Facebook groups for comprehension-based methods, the IFLT and TPRS CI teaching Facebook group and the CI liftoff group for starters for AP, and I'm sure you'll find a lot of helpful posts there. Okay, so Katie said, recommended activities as we start back that pull from the target structures that students have already learned. Yeah, so as you're going back, I think such a great thing to do is to give yourself a couple days of not planning out a specific lesson to teach. Come in where with a lesson like similar to weekend chat, but vacation chat, where you're just talking about what has happened over break. And when you do that, I would say my only caution would be that to remember that not all students have just celebrated Christmas, and not all students have had a warm and fuzzy break with their families. Not all students got gifts. And so be mindful of the questions that you're asking your students as you get into vacation chat, and try to think of questions that any student can have an answer to without feeling like an outcast. And I have I should have been more sensitive to this all along. I knew that I had students that weren't celebrating Christmas, but I didn't really get it until my family stopped celebrating Christmas. And, that's on me. I wish I had been more thoughtful about that sooner. But here I am, and my son goes back to class, and all of the other kids in his class that I know of, he has a pretty small class, have just celebrated Christmas, and they all had Christmas trees. And so he is, he is the one on the outside. And so I am just so thankful. Actually, this year his teacher is Jewish, so they stay away from Christmas activities. But I'm so thankful now for teachers that have always gone out of their way, long before I did, to make all students feel included, talking about breaks. And I was always really careful in Anchorage. I had a lot of students who were homeless. And so, winter break was a really hard thing for them. So anyway, as you go back though, definitely talk to your kids about what has happened over break, who they have talked with, ways that they were generous or helpful. Try to talk about those qualities that you want to bring out in your students, and to make those qualities seem like the norm. And if you look, I have a post on like 10 ways to talk about your weekend with students. You can look up some ideas in there. Allison Weinhold she has a blog post from, I think, earlier this week that you can look up. That's like first day back winter plans, and she has a bunch of different resources for supporting chat. Maris Hawkins just did a post on her blog about horoscopes or predictions. That's another fairly loose, just conversational activity. And so those are really good, Katie, because they give you an opportunity to tailor, to see what your students have acquired, to see what, they've just been gone for a week or 2 weeks. And so you can see what language is freely at their disposal. What can they use with ease? What can they understand with ease? And you can adjust your lesson plans moving forward based on that conversation. 90-minute blocks, yes. So I taught on a semi-block. I had Monday, Tuesday, Friday classes for the last 2 years that I was teaching. Monday, Tuesday, Friday were regular classes. I had 45 or 50-minute periods, whatever it was. And then on Wednesday, Thursday, my kids were on a block. And so I would say for block classes, just plan different kinds of activities. Plan something in there that is a break for you. So either an activity where your students are writing, or your students are sitting down and reading something, or online activities like Senor Wooly or Textivate. Make sure you are not planning a full 90 minutes of you being in front of your students, even if it's something where a reading is projected and you're reading through it with your students. That is going to be exhausting. So plan a break in there, and then use brain breaks. I think that brain breaks aren't the end all be all, but they are really helpful in those long class periods when you're looking for opportunities to get students up and moving. Just keep them short, and be mindful of those transitions. Anytime you're going into an activity and coming out of an activity, you can really lose minutes. And so make sure you have tight expectations for transitions. I know in my classes, I forgot about this until just recently, but I would always sing Los pollitos dicen. So I would just start singing Los pollitos dicen, pío, 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 cuando tienen hambre, cuando tienen frío. And then by the time I was done with the song, we only did one rep of the song. All students were supposed to be in their seats, sitting, working quietly, and they would join in and sing with me. It was like the first song that we did in level 1. And so it was a really calming, peaceful, nice transition that I used often. So find a song that your students know, sing it, have them join in with you, and then you can quickly move on to the next thing. So Canta Ninja, Canta Ninja, sorry, I always say it wrong. Canta Ninja. That is my Singing Ninja, which was this really silly thing that I did with my students that worked really well for me. And maybe it'll work well for you too. Anytime I had these little pieces of paper, they were chiles, pictures of little chili peppers. And anytime that my students helped me, or anytime that they answered one of my questions, I just always had like this pile of chili peppers in my hand. They were just little pieces of paper like this big. I would give them a little chili pepper paper, and they would write their name on the back, and then at the end of the class period, they would put it in a bag. And then once a week, I would do a drawing for like really dumb prizes, like lollipops. Caramel apple pops from Costco were always the favorite. But then every day to start class, the Singing Ninja, that's why I'm talking about this, I would draw one name out of the hat, and I had this foam sword, and whoever name I drew would be the Singing Ninja for that day. And the Singing Ninja had this magical power to stop class anytime and allow us to listen to a song. And so it was a brain break that students were in control of. It wasn't a brain-based brain break. A brain-based brain break is one in which students are forced to cross the midline. So, you've got your, like the prime meridian, geography term, of your body is your midline. And a brain-based brain break is going to be one that causes students to cross it. So an activity like hand clapping games where they're crossing, anytime they're turning their body left to right, those are really great for students. But a brain break doesn't have to be one that causes students to cross the midline. So the Singing Ninja was one that they we would sing a song. I would throw the lyrics up on the board. If we had motions for it, I would have all the students stand up and we'd do it together. But sometimes if it was just a couple minutes that we listened to a song and I didn't really have any strict expectations for what they should or shouldn't be doing during that time. And then we would go back. And my students really loved that ability. They would try to be strategic about when they chose it. They would get an opportunity to choose the song that's their, to listen to their favorite song that they loved. And so my list of songs for that was just any songs that we had done before in class. So sometimes they were songs that I had taught that we'd worked with in a unit. Sometimes they were just songs that I had, one day just thrown up like, oh, look at this song. If you use Senor Woolley, they could be his songs. Any songs that your students are kind of familiar with that you would be okay with them with listening to again in your classes. And I just had a playlist on my iTunes. And so they would just really quickly, they got to scan through, all the songs on the playlist and pick one. Okay, Carolyn, Nuevo Houdini, you're in luck. I blogged about it. It was a long time ago, but the novel's the same, so you can still use all the materials. So just search El Nuevo Houdini on my blog and follow the plans. You'll need the teacher's guide from Fluency Matters in order to follow the plans that I laid out. But that was my saving grace. I left that for lesson plans when I was on maternity leave one year. And if you have the teacher's manual, you are going to be good to go. And the teacher's manual, I believe, has even been expanded since when I used it. So you're going to be in great shape. I would not recommend, Becky, I would not recommend the SOMOS curriculum for adult classes that meet once a week. I would not recommend the SOMOS curriculum for any classes that meet once a week. I get that question pretty often. I just think that there are a lot better options for classes, that there's just so much content in that curriculum that to only go through, you would just be going so slowly if you're only meeting once a week. So I say if you have a class that's meeting once a week, keep it very personalized. Do persona especial, special person interviews. I'm sorry, I just always slip into Spanish because that's my teaching background and context. But no matter what language you teach, special person interviews. You can also look up Star of the Day or Special Chair. That is a contribution from Jody Noble to our profession. She started it, I believe, as the special chair. And so I would say that is a great option. Another option for adult classes would be talking about current events. If they're new classes, that might be a little bit more challenging, but I've found that my adult learner students, because I have students again, I'm really excited about it if you can't tell, they love learning about current events and just having conversations that are at their intellectual level. They do both have some experience, some significant experience with Spanish already though. So if they're newbies, just special person would be a great way to start. Oh, top organization / time management tips for teacher moms of little kids. Well, that is a great question. So as you may or may not know, I have a lot of little kids. But I'm also not a full-time teacher mom. So I have, my oldest just turned 7 a couple days ago. So I have a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 1-year-old. And my 7-year-old is in school, but everyone else is home with me full time. So my top organization and time management tips is go to bed early and get up early. That is not, that used to be my natural habit. I would prefer always to go to bed on the early side and get up on the early side. And then I had little kids. And now I prefer to stay up late and have time for myself to do the things that I want to do. And then because I've stayed up late, I don't want to get up so early. But when I do, I find that I'm way more productive and I can just start my day with a much better attitude with them. And then as far as time management, having a list of meals that you can prepare really fast is really helpful to me. So meals that the kids enjoy and that I can prepare really fast. And then I've done freezer meals before, and those are awesome. I don't have a chest freezer anymore since we moved. I've got to get a new one, so that doesn't really work for me anymore. But I would do freezer meals, and that was fantastic. And then just leaving work at school. For me, it doesn't look like it's not leaving work at school, but I do have a nanny that's here a couple hours a day for a few days each week. And if I limit my work time to that and I don't let myself get sucked into doing the projects that I want to do and that I need to do outside of that, I am much happier and my kids are much happier. Work is always going to be there. You're always going to have activity, things that you need to get done for school. But you are going to go crazy and you're going to end up, what I find is that my kids start fighting and then I have fights to break up and they start making a mess because they're getting into things that they shouldn't be getting into because I'm trying to get stuff done. So if I can just give them the time that they need and look for opportunities to lessen my workload or just be strict about when I'm doing work and not doing work. And yes, I would say, yes, Allison just blogged about that. So look into that. Erica Peplinski also has a lot of great advice for just teacher mental health, and that applies to anyone, not just moms of kids. Okay, once a week, 1 hour class. Alba, same thing. I would say just do special person interviews. Look up special person interviews. Do that. That's it. So you don't do target structures. Don't just do special person interviews. There are so many resources out there. I've got a PowerPoint on TPT. Bryce Hedstrom has super exhaustive, comprehensive materials on his website about the whole process of doing special person interviews. So do that. Yes, avoid storytelling on the second half of the block day. Suzanne, that is huge, wonderful advice. So yes, anytime that I would plan to do story asking, not necessarily storytelling. If I'm telling a story, I feel like I can often have the energy still for that. But story asking where you're up in front of your students and you're trying to get them to interact with you and maybe have actors, don't plan that for the second half of a block day, and don't plan that for Friday. Don't plan that for any day that you are done and exhausted. I would always do my, almost always, I would plan my story asking for Tuesdays. So I just gave myself an easy Monday to kind of transition back into the week. And then Tuesday, I drank a lot of water and I did my story asking in all of my classes. And then the rest of the week, it was easier to manage other things. Strip bingo. So strip bingo, for any of you guys that don't know, this is Tracy's question, is a super duper fun activity. And it is, I like to say that it is deceptively not scandalous. So you could call it rip bingo, but that's no fun. But if you're gonna get fired if you call it strip bingo, then definitely call it rip bingo. And so strip bingo is students create a bingo board on a strip of paper, a text. You have a text. Students write words on their bingo boards from the text. So I usually don't give them the whole, all of the words in the text to choose from. I only choose some. And if you want the game to go really fast, give them words from the text that are high frequency, that appear a lot. And if you want the game to go slow and for you to read through the text several times as you're playing the game, then choose words that only appear once or twice in the text. And all they do is they write their words on a piece of paper. And I'm just making one up out of the top of my head for, this would be about like las 12 uvas, the 12 grapes at midnight. So I just, I would give my students a word bank. I like doing word clouds for this, partly because they look nice, but partly because that's just a really easy way to generate a word list from something, from a text. And then, yep, they write out, it could be anywhere from 5 to 9 words on a strip. And then you just start reading the text aloud to them. If it was a chapter from a book, you just start reading aloud the chapter. And anytime that they hear one of their words, if it is on an end, like eat or grapes, I say, oh, you eat, and then they can rip it off. Grapes, oh, and then they can rip that one off. At midnight on January 1st. The only catch, so then they can rip that in half when they get their last one. The only catch is that if a word appears, I shouldn't have done it already. If a word is not on an end, so gosh, where did I just ripped everything. So if I was reading along and this is what my strip looked like, if I said midnight, because it's in the middle, it's not on an end, they wouldn't be able to eliminate it. So that they would have to wait until they heard it again. And so that's why if you choose words that only appear once or twice in the reading, the game will take a long time because they would have to wait for you to read through the text a whole second time in order to be able to eliminate that word. Hi, Abby. Hi, Shannon. Yes, French units soon. I feel terrible because my huge goal for 2018 was to have Unit 8 done, and all during break, I have intended to keep working on that every day. And you can have reasons or you can have results. And I don't have results. I just got reasons for why I didn't get it done. So hopefully soon. That is a priority for me to get Unit 10 done for the coming school year. So 8, 9, and 10. So it will be soon. Blair is so wonderful. I just need to, she has all of these amazing materials that she's come up with for Unit 8 right now, which is about food. And then I have all the work that Julia Ullman and Marianne Kowalski have already done on those units. I just have to put it all together. So feel free to keep harassing me about it. I have a few people who've harassed me about French units regularly, and that is welcome. I'm not offended. It's not a bother. It helps me to do what I intend to do. Subplans, yes, so many subplans ideas. I would say just Google subplans on my blog, and you'll have 1 billion subplan ideas. Not that many, but you'll have a lot. So that would be my recommendation for that. Oh yes, TG is Teacher's Guide. If you're teaching a novel, get the Teacher's Guide. That is the moral of the story. Sometimes I hear people say, oh, but they're so expensive. They're not expensive. If you consider what is in them and how much easier it is going to make your life, it is your lesson plans for, in those teacher's guides, there's enough materials to fill weeks of instruction. You can, get grants, get your administration to buy it. If your admin isn't buying books for you, if they don't have money, period, across the board, that's one thing. But if they're buying books for your English departments, they better be buying books for you. So my admin, she was so good. If I ever gave her a book request, she would buy me anything, because the price of our materials compared to the price of, for me, it was for core subjects, because we weren't a core subject, we were an elective. It is so small that if you can take some time explain to your admin that you are doing the same things that they are doing in English language arts classes, that you are supporting those same objectives, and you can do it with this much money. And instead of asking for textbooks, you can spend this much money on getting a class set of novels and a teacher's guide. I mean, a class set of novels and a teacher's guide is like, I don't know, it's less than $300, and you have it forever. That's a one-time cost. That's crazy. So your admin should be buying those for you. And if they're not, I'm sorry, because that is really frustrating when other people's admins are buying them stuff and yours aren't buying them for you. Oh, yes. Okay, so Hope did the Reyes Magos strip bingo. Oh, yeah, I have one for Reyes Magos. So that's something for Three Kings. So you can look that up. It's I think it's free in my store for this week for Three Kings Day. My blog is comprehensibleclassroom.com, or you can look up martinabex.com. Either way, it'll take you to the same place. Donors Choose did, yes. You know, a lot of teachers have success with Donors Choose. Really exciting. So Megan, I'm glad that even though your admin was super lame and didn't buy it, they should have, that you had fantastic donors that stepped in. Felipe, hello. So Carolyn, for that question, definitely ask in the Fluency Matters comprehension-based readers group on Facebook. So if you're teaching with novels, Fluency Matters comprehension-based readers group on Facebook. Felipe Allo is one of their novels, and they will help you out so much. Both the Fluency Matters team and other teachers that have taught that novel will be able to support you in that. And oh, great question. So Sandra asked, suggestions to get the students understanding verb conjugations in other tenses and to get them writing. Wow. My suggestion is to give your students lots and lots of comprehensible input, which just means giving them contextualized language that they can understand. And don't be afraid of using different tenses. You can use anything with your students when you start teaching like this. And to me, that was so freeing, that you don't have to make yourself sound unnatural in the interest of students understanding you, because you're teaching the present tense right now, and so you can only use present tense. You can teach anything. And I know in Spanish, which is my frame of reference here, a lot of verbs look very similar in different tenses. And so you don't even have to tell students what they mean. They can just follow you based on the sound of the words and the context. If you want to draw attention to different tenses, I know Alicia Cardenas, I don't know if it was a recent blog or she recently shared an old blog about some tricks that she used, some cues and some gestures that she uses to help draw her students' attention to which tense or which time frame she's working with. So she has like a past tense rug, and so any time that she's talking about something in the past tense, she just steps onto that rug, and that's the students a support to help them understand that, okay, the words that I'm hearing right now are referring to the past. I have gestures for all of the main words that I used in class. So like has, I just held my hands out like, ella tiene. So this was has. And then if it was in the past and I said tenía, I would say tenía. And then I would just wave my hand over my shoulder like this, tenía. And then you can further draw their students' attention to it by asking a quick comprehension check. That serves the dual purpose of checking for comprehension and also supporting comprehension for students that maybe didn't get it the first time. And you can say tenía. You can say, oh, Bobby, what does that mean in English? Or you could say, oh, tenía. So tiene means has. What do you think tenía means? They say had. Yay, great job, you're so smart, well done. So those are some ideas. And then to get them writing, give them opportunities to write. Write and discuss is a really great strategy. It's just when you're creating a written text together as a class, and Tina Hargaden has put together a lot of resources about it. But that's when you are just talking about something with your students and you're basically asking them what to say, what to summarize. So I would use that with my stories all the time. Almost every story we did. It wasn't called I didn't call it write and discuss, but it's the same thing. So anytime in the SOMOS curriculum that you hear me say, like, or that you hear me reference, have your students summarize the story to you and write it out on the board. If you look up Tina's write and discuss, you can get a better idea of what I'm asking you to do in those instances. But it's where you say, like, oh, what happened in the store yesterday? They went to the store, and you write on the board, they went to the store. So that's a way for you to kind of coach them through writing, to model writing for them. And then give them opportunities to do, 5-minute free writes here and there, and then use those texts in class as a source for further input. The group name again, the Fluency, I don't know which one of you are, probably the Fluency Matters Comprehension-Based Readers Group. Oh, see, look, I should have just kept scrolling because Alicia already answered the question. Thank you. All the teachers, oh, yes. So Kaylin said, what do you do about the teachers' number levels that expect students to know grammar, conjugations, and tenses? Alina Filipescu has a wonderful blog post about what she does with her students. And basically she does what she needs to do, what she knows is best for her students all year long. And then right at the end of the year, she spends a little bit of time familiarizing them with conjugation charts and more traditional grammar stuff, knowing that it's not going to, it's not what leads to language acquisition. Some high aptitude students are going to latch onto it. They're going to love it. They're going to benefit from it. Some students are going to feel a little bit overwhelmed by it. And so that's why it's really important to make sure students know that this is not high stakes. You're not testing them on this. This is helpful information, and if it doesn't stick with them, that's okay. And then look for fun ways to do it. And Alina's blog post on the subject, I think, has some really helpful tips. She blogs on the TPRS for Chinese.blogspot.com. She doesn't teach Chinese, but that's the name of the blog. There's a couple different people that blog on it. So I would look at that, and then just on that topic, I would say, I think that it is the kind and the right thing to do to cater to those teachers' demands a little bit. So it's not going to cost you much to spend a couple class periods going over conjugation charts. If it's low stakes, it's not going to negatively impact your students. It's not going to ruin the language learning experience for them. And for the sake of peace in your department, and for the sake of furthering what you are trying to do and getting people on your side, that is going to go a long way. Because if you are refusing to do the kinds of activities that they're doing in their classes, they're going to refuse to do the kinds of activities that you're doing in your classes. And so please do look for opportunities to, what's that word? Compromise a little bit. Not especially like toward the end of the year, or just sprinkle in little things throughout the year, but make sure that there are low stakes. Make sure that students know they're not going to be tested on it, and make sure you're pulling from things that you've already done. So, if you're going to show students past tense conjugations, make sure that you have been using the past tense in class, and so they have something to draw from. District exams, Megan, those are hard, and it really depends on what district you have, but I would say approach them in the same way. There might be things that you need to do in order to prepare students for what they're going to see on those tests, but I think that you'll find in most cases, if there aren't like super crazy extensive vocabulary lists required for those exams, you'll find that the students coming out of comprehension-based programs are going to slay those exams. And you can look at Grant Boulanger's blog, A Nail in the Coffin. I think the second post. So the first one was about what's it called? People staying in your program. So like, I can't think of the word right now. The first one's about like kids staying in the program. And then the second one is about their performance. And so he gave a fairly traditional test and has data from his district about how students performed. And then if there is crazy extensive vocabulary list, then you got to do what you got to do. If you need to spend a day or a couple days just pumping massive amounts of vocabulary into students' brains with Quizlet or whatever, you can do it. But look for opportunities to be changing the program. One suggestion I think I saw from Kristen Duncan back in the day, which I think was so smart, was to consider, to talk with your the other teachers in your department about looking at textbook vocabulary lists and saying which one or two words can we drop from this list this year. So just very slowly narrowing it down. Carrie Toth has a lot of great resources on her blog, somewhere to share. She has, like, she calls it the chuck it bucket, that she talks about just trimming down those crazy textbook vocab lists to what's really important and useful. And so there's a lot of different strategies you can do for that. And that is it for tonight. So I hope that those of you going back to school tomorrow have a wonderful week.